Imagine for a second that someone just hands you a hard drive.
Okay.
And on this hard drive is a complete unedited record of 10 years of a single human being's most private conversations.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, every text message, every bitter fight, every quiet confession of love.
Every moment of panic. Right?
Exactly.
Yep.
Every moment of panic, every moment of absolute clarity, just all of it.
That's a lot of raw data.
It's a massive data set.
Yeah.
And if you fed that data set into a sophisticated cybersecurity algorithm, what would it tell you about how we protect our hearts?
That is such a fascinating question.
Right. So today, we're attempting something entirely unprecedented on this deep dive. We're basically reverse engineering the ultimate, most complex operating system on the planet.
Which is a human being.
Yes, a human being.
It is a phenomenal paradigm shift, really. I mean, we spend so much time analyzing human behavior through, the lens of psychology.
We're sociologists.
Right, sociology, or even evolutionary biology. But applying the rigid structural logic of network security to human relationships, it reveals patterns that are honestly almost invisible otherwise.
It totally does. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Our mission today is to take this massive stack of personal communication logs, years of social and emotional data, and analyze them through the specific lens of a cybersecurity mindset.
Yeah, and if you are familiar with, say, the classic tech show Security Now with Steve Gibson, you already know the vocabulary we're going to use today.
Oh, absolutely. You know about routers, malware, encrypted data packets?
Zero-day exploits, firewalls, all of that.
Yeah. But today, instead of looking at silicon and fiber optics and, server racks, we are examining human networks.
Human networks, physical and virtual social networks.
Right. We are exploring emotional firewalls, human vulnerability management, and social security.
And just to be clear for the listener, we do not mean the government pension program.
No, definitely not. I mean the literal protocols we use to secure our social lives.
The translation between those two worlds is shocking once you really see it.
It really is.
Because an emotional life is fundamentally an operating system. You have a core processing unit, which is your mind.
Your executive function.
Right, your heart, your executive function. And you are constantly sending and receiving packets of data with other nodes on the global network.
And those other nodes are the people in your life.
Exactly.
And, think about your own network for a second. Sometimes you have these pristine, perfectly encrypted, high-speed fiber optic connections where data just flows beautifully.
No latency.
Right? No latency. You understand each other perfectly. There's no lag, no misinterpretation.
But then other times.
Yeah, other times you accidentally let a Trojan horse into your core processing unit.
Oh, man. And it just wreaks absolute havoc.
Total havoc. It deletes files, it crashes your systems, it just leaves you completely vulnerable.
Just like an enterprise computer network, your emotional network requires active, conscious administration. You can't just plug it into the internet and hope for the best.
You really can't.
You have to monitor your system load. You have to verify the authentication credentials of new devices trying to connect to you.
And occasionally you have to brutally quarantine a corrupted file before it infects the rest of your system.
Yeah, which brings us to our source material for today.
Yeah.
Because we have hit the absolute mother lode.
We really have. We have an archive of Facebook messages spanning over a decade. And they all center around one primary node.
He is effectively the systems administrator of this specific social network.
Right. His name is Chad Brown.
And this archive is a treasure trove. I mean, it gives us unparalleled root-level access to Chad's event logs.
Root-level access. I love that.
We get to read his raw communications with his close friends, his romantic partners, acquaintances, colleagues.
We aren't getting the polished, sanitized version of his life at all.
No, we're seeing the raw data on how a human being actually manages incoming threats, maintains system stability, and handles complex connections over a massive period of time.
So we are going to look at how he manages his baseline network stability. We will look at what happens when a trusted node, like a best friend, gets infected with malicious code.
We'll examine how he navigates zero-trust environments.
Which, in the human world, looks exactly like dealing with an intensely jealous partner.
Oh, absolutely.
And we will even see him execute active, cold-blooded incident response when someone on his network needs to escape a physically abusive situation.
But to start, I mean, before you can secure any network, you have to understand the hardware you are running on.
Right. That is the foundational rule of systems administration.
You cannot protect a server if you do not know how much RAM it has, what operating system it is running, and what its thermal limits are.
You have to map the local machine.
Yes, map the local machine.
So let's map Chad's local machine. We are going to look at his core system architecture and his personal security philosophy.
And the very first thing that jumps out of these logs is Chad's intense awareness of his own processing limits.
It's so striking. He has a conversation with a friend named Hugh Walker, and Chad is explaining his own internal processing load. And he tells Hugh, quote, "My stress anxiety threshold is low." He says, "Any little increase makes me start feeling overwhelmed."
Which is a very honest self-assessment.
But then he says something that is just so visceral. He says that when that threshold is crossed, quote, "I start losing focus to the point I feel like I could easily run over a pedestrian or go through a red light."
Wow. That is a perfect description of a system hitting 100% CPU load.
Like it's just maxed out.
Totally maxed out.
Mm.
In server architecture, we have monitoring tools that track CPU usage, right?
Sure.
If a server is running at 40 or 50% capacity, it handles requests instantly. But if it hits 95 or 99% capacity, it doesn't just slow down.
It starts dropping packets.
Exactly. It experiences catastrophic lag. Essential background processes just fail.
And Chad recognizes that his emotional CPU has a hard, unyielding limit.
He knows exactly what happens when he experiences a denial of service attack from his own anxiety.
His system resources get entirely consumed by the anxiety process.
And his primary executive functions, the functions required to notice a red light or see a pedestrian while driving, they literally do not have the compute power to run. They go offline.
It's terrifying when you put it that way. When the amygdala detects a threat, the prefrontal cortex,
The logical sysadmin of the brain.
exactly, the sysadmin gets locked out. So if he knows his system is that fragile, how does he configure his daily life?
He has to build massive emotional firewalls.
Right, he has to build a perimeter defense that is practically impenetrable.
Because his threshold for overload is so low, he just cannot afford to process junk data.
He values independence and alone time almost above everything else.
Throughout these logs, he constantly advocates for a concept he calls balance.
Yeah, he tells another friend that you need to actively balance kids, friends, girlfriends, and hobbies for, quote, long-term sustainability.
That phrase, long-term sustainability, it sounds like it was pulled directly out of an IT infrastructure manual.
It really does. But let's look at the underlying mechanism there. Because this intense need for a strong firewall isn't just because he was born with a naturally anxious brain.
Right. The logs show us that there is legacy trauma in his system.
Yeah, legacy trauma. He talks to a partner about a time in his past when he was starving, completely broke, and sharing a dilapidated house with strangers. And he specifically mentions the horror of, quote, the leaks and the rats.
The leaks and the rats. Legacy trauma is the human equivalent of a catastrophic hardware failure.
Like a server room flooding.
Exactly. When a server room floods or when a massive power surge fries the motherboards, it leaves a permanent mark on the operating system's design going forward.
You don't just rebuild it the same way.
No, you don't. When you have experienced that kind of catastrophic failure, in Chad's case, extreme poverty, hunger, and the lack of a safe physical environment, you hard-code new rules into your firewall to ensure it never, ever happens again.
You become obsessed with redundancy and stability.
Right.
And he summarizes this philosophy beautifully. He shares this quote with a friend named Brent to describe his entire approach to life.
Oh, I know the quote you're talking about.
I want to read the whole thing because it's just so profound. He says, quote, "Let your boat of life be light, packed with only what you need, a homely home and simple pleasures, one or two friends, worth the name, someone to love and someone to love you, a cat, a dog, and a pipe or two, enough to eat and enough to wear, and a little more than enough to drink, for thirst is a dangerous thing."
Thirst is a dangerous thing.
Yeah.
If you want a masterclass in cybersecurity philosophy, there it is in 6 words.
Break that down for me. How does thirst translate to network security?
Well, in security engineering, we talk constantly about the attack surface.
Okay, the attack surface.
The attack surface is the total sum of all the different points where an unauthorized user can try to enter data to or extract data from your environment. If you have 50 software programs running, hundreds of open ports, and dozens of user accounts, your attack surface is massive.
There are a million ways a hacker can get in.
Exactly. By keeping his needs simple and his boat light, Chad is intentionally minimizing his emotional attack surface.
So he's basically saying, I don't need a massive mansion. I don't need a huge social circle. I don't need excessive wealth.
Because every one of those things is an open port that requires monitoring.
Right. Every extra thing is a vulnerability.
Precisely. And the thirst he mentions, that is the vulnerability that forces you to open those ports.
Okay, I see.
In human terms, thirst is desperation. It is an intense craving. It is an unmet basic need.
And when a human being is emotionally or physically thirsty, they click on the malicious link.
They ignore the red flags.
Yeah. They bypass their own security protocols because they're desperate for a connection, validation, or a resource.
By ensuring he has just enough to eat, just enough to wear, and simple pleasures, he eliminates the desperation that leads to catastrophic breaches.
That makes perfect sense. He is keeping the attack surface microscopic.
Right.
But, even with a tiny attack surface, you still have to let some people in, right?
Of course.
Because if you're running a secure network, you don't just let any random device plug into your mainframe. You need a rigorous authentication protocol.
You need a handshake protocol to verify identity and intent.
Uh-huh.
And Chad has a brilliantly efficient one.
He does. He shares his specific rule with his partner, Lauren. It's based on an article about the qualities you need in a partner, but he distills it down into a 3-point checklist.
And what's the rule?
The rule is respect for property, animals, other people.
Mm-hmm.
And he states unequivocally, quote, if they do not respect any of the three, then they aren't good enough for you.
It is a literal 3-factor authentication system. Property, animals, people.
Yes, 3 factors.
And the brilliance of that specific heuristic is its speed and its low processing overhead.
What do you mean by heuristic?
So, in cybersecurity, we use heuristics to detect viruses. Instead of having a rigid, millions of lines long list of every known virus.
Like a dictionary.
Right, like a dictionary of signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of that, a heuristic scanner looks for behavior.
Oh, okay.
Does this program try to modify system files? Does it try to hide itself? If yes, flag it.
And Chad is doing the exact same thing.
Yes. He doesn't need to put a new acquaintance through a 6-month psychological evaluation to figure out their childhood trauma.
Right. He just watches them.
Yeah.
How do they treat a waiter? Do they kick a stray cat? Do they trash a hotel room?
It is a millisecond ping that returns instant packet data about their core programming.
And if the ping comes back corrupted, if they show disrespect in any of those 3 categories, the connection is instantly refused at the firewall level.
No further analysis needed.
It's so efficient. But wait, hold on. I'm looking at this architecture, and I kind of have to challenge this setup.
Okay, let's hear it.
Is Chad's strict requirement for balance, alone time, and these rigid 3-factor authentication rules, is that actually healthy boundary setting, or is he basically air-gapping his emotional computer?
We'll define air gapping for the listener.
So in tech, an air-gapped computer is a machine that is physically isolated from unsecured networks, like the public internet.
Right.
It literally has a gap of air between it and the rest of the world. Mm-hmm. It is incredibly secure. Nobody can hack it remotely.
But because it's disconnected, it's also incredibly limited in what it can do.
Exactly. It can't communicate.
Yeah.
So my question is Chad's massive firewall preventing him from experiencing deeper vulnerability? Is he so secure that he's emotionally isolated?
That is the fundamental tension in all of security, both digital and human. It's the classic dilemma, security versus usability.
Security versus usability.
The more secure a system is, the harder it is to use.
Right.
The more isolated Chad is, the safer he is from being hurt by the leaks and the rats. But you're right, the trade-off is that he risks missing out on the deep, messy, high-bandwidth connections of profound intimacy.
So do you think he's air-gapped?
Honestly, analyzing the totality of the logs, I wouldn't classify his system as air-gapped.
How so?
He isn't physically isolated. He just requires a VPN, a virtual private network.
Okay, explain that.
He wants secure, encrypted, predictable tunnels to the people he cares about. He doesn't want his ports open to the public internet where any random piece of malware can scan him, but he is deeply connected to a select few nodes.
He has just decided that the usability of a massive, messy social life is not worth the security risk to his fragile CPU.
Exactly. But that strict perimeter defense creates a massive dilemma.
It does, because if you lock the doors so tightly, what happens when a piece of malicious code doesn't come from the outside, but originates from a node you already trust inside your network?
And that's exactly what Chad faces with his friend Brent.
Yes, which brings us to a major section of the logs, focusing on vulnerability management and addiction.
Brent is, without a doubt, the most compromised node on Chad's network.
Oh, 100%.
And because Brent is already inside Chad's firewall, I mean, they are close friends, the threat is persistent and incredibly complex to manage.
Let's look at the threat vector. Brent is a recovering addict.
The logs are heavy. They mention crystal meth, needles.
Yeah, it's dark. But underneath the chemical addiction, the core vulnerability is this crippling anxiety, intense self-hatred, and incredibly low self-esteem.
Brent actually says at one point in the logs, quote, "If you knew how I felt about myself, it would probably make you sick."
It's heartbreaking. He says his insecurities eat him alive. And he describes the anxiety as so brutal that, quote, "I'd rather die than have anxiety all damn day. I prefer drugs."
If we map this to our paradigm, addiction is the ultimate rootkit.
Okay, explain what a rootkit is, because that term gets thrown around a lot in spy movies, but the actual mechanics are fascinating.
Right. So a rootkit is a specific type of malicious software designed to hide the existence of certain processes or programs from normal methods of detection.
So it burrows in deep.
It burrows beneath the operating system itself. It gets root privileges, which is the highest level of administrative control.
Wow.
Because it sits below the OS, the antivirus software, which relies on the OS to scan the computer. It can't even see it.
So it's invisible.
The rootkit hijacks the core system calls. It intercepts data before the user even knows it exists.
And that is exactly what addiction does to the human brain. It burrows into the deepest, oldest parts of the neurobiology, the dopamine and reward pathways.
It hijacks the survival instincts.
Precisely. And the rootkit forces the host machine to lie. It spoofs its data packets to the network admin just to keep the malicious code running.
And Chad diagnoses this perfectly. He acts as an external IT administrator for Brent.
Yeah, he tells him, quote, "If I hadn't called you out on it, you'd still be manipulating me." Addiction makes you do that so much.
He defines the manipulation for Brent. He says, when you don't tell somebody the truth because of your needs, that's manipulation.
Chad realizes that the lies aren't coming from Brent the person. They're coming from the rootkit.
The addiction is spoofing the packets.
Exactly. And while Chad is trying to figure out how to patch this rootkit, Brent goes and downloads another massive malicious payload.
Oh, right. A highly toxic romantic relationship.
Yes, because the system compromised by a rootkit is highly vulnerable to secondary infections.
Right. The defenses are already down.
Brent falls for a girl who he literally says, quote, broke something in him.
Reading Brent's messages about this relationship is like watching a server crash in real time.
It really is. He's completely infatuated, calling her his everything, but in the exact same breath, he tells Chad, quote, "How can I love her so much I want to smother her with her own memory foam pillow?"
That relationship is functioning like ransomware.
Ooh, that's a good one. Let's break that down. How does ransomware work?
Ransomware is malicious code that infiltrates a system and encrypts the user's files, locking them out of their own data.
Right. And then they demand a ransom.
Exactly. It holds the system hostage and demands a ransom, usually cryptocurrency, to restore access. But the insidious part of ransomware is the psychological grip it has on the victim.
Because they're just staring at a countdown timer.
Yes, the victim is paralyzed, consumed by panic, pouring all their resources into trying to appease the attacker.
And this toxic romance is exploiting all of Brent's pre-existing insecurities. It locks up all of his emotional resources, holds his peace of mind hostage, and demands constant anxiety and attention in return.
And Chad sees this threat immediately. He tries to install an emergency patch.
He tells Brent he needs a clean break and clean friends. He warns him that absolutely no good can come of this connection.
And this is where Chad's troubleshooting steps get really, really tactical.
Yeah, he offers Brent what we could call a safe harbor environment.
He tells Brent he can come live with him, rent-free.
He gives him a recovery roadmap. He says, go to school, work at the university, build skills.
Chad says, quote, "I know I talk about going to school a lot, but honestly, that's where I learned to be confident."
And then he tells him, point blank, to minimize risks.
Minimize risks. That is pure IT risk management protocol.
How so?
In computing, when a system is deeply corrupted and unstable, you don't try to run complex high-resource applications. You boot the system into safe mode.
Oh, right, safe mode, where the screen looks all weird and low resolution.
Exactly. Safe mode loads only the bare minimum essential drivers required for the operating system to function.
So no third-party applications.
No high-end graphics drivers, no startup scripts. It creates a stripped-down, stable environment so you can hunt down the malware and fix the registry.
And Chad understands that Brent's Brent's system is too fragile to handle complex environments right now.
He needs to run his life in safe mode.
Only essential drivers. Safe housing, basic education, simple routines, no toxic girlfriends, no chaotic social scenes.
And he even gives him physical hardware reboot protocols.
Oh, I love this part. There's this amazing exchange in the logs where Brent is tweaking.
He's high on crystal meth.
Yeah, and his brain is hyper-focusing. He's spending hours reading online psychology journals, just spinning his wheels, totally stuck in a loop.
And Chad realizes Brent's CPU is overheating. The cooling fan is spinning out of control.
So you just asked him in the chat, did you shower?
And Brent replies that he doesn't think so.
And Chad says, quote, go run some water molecules over yourself.
I love the phrasing so much. Go run some water molecules over yourself. It is a literal hardware reset.
Like hitting the power button.
Yeah. When a CPU is experiencing thermal runaway, when it is processing so hard that it is physically overheating, it will eventually crash to protect itself.
Right.
You have to introduce a physical change of state. You have to cool the hardware to break the runaway processing loops.
And Chad knows that arguing logic with a brain on meth is pointless. He addresses the hardware directly. Okay, here is my absolute favorite part of the Brent logs. I want to run an analogy by you, and you tell me if the tech holds up.
Okay, let's hear it.
Chad's advice to Brent about handling his baseline anxiety sounds exactly like updating firewall rules using stateful inspection.
Oh, wow. Walk me through your thinking.
So, Brent is getting flooded with these anxious, self-hating thoughts, and Chad tells him to use reason over feelings.
Right.
Chad says you have to recognize an irrational fear, quickly dismiss it, and step forward. He literally writes to Brent, quote, the quicker you dismiss your thoughts of why you can't and do the thing, the quicker that feeling goes away. And then he adds the crucial part. He says, quote, practice the recognizing, A&D dismissing. The more you practice, the better you get.
Yeah.
Isn't that exactly how you train a modern firewall to recognize false positives and drop garbage packets?
That is a phenomenal analogy. It maps perfectly to both network security and cognitive behavioral therapy.
Let's explain the tech first.
Okay, so early firewalls were stateless. They just looked at the source and destination of a packet.
Pretty basic.
But a stateful inspection firewall is much smarter. It monitors the active state of a connection. It looks at the context of the traffic.
Okay.
When you are training a sophisticated intrusion detection system, you use heuristic analysis. At first, the firewall might flag a completely harmless data packet as a threat.
And that is the equivalent of an anxiety attack over something benign, like, going to the grocery store.
Right. Brent's brain says the grocery store is a lethal threat.
Exactly.
What Chad is telling Brent to do is manual stateful inspection. Look at the feeling, verify its origin, look at the context.
Is the grocery store a real threat, or is it just the rootkit of anxiety spoofing a threat signature?
If reason dictates it's a fake threat, drop the packet immediately. Do not process it.
Don't entertain the thought.
Do not open the packet to see what's inside. And the more Brent does this manual dropping of packets, the more automated his internal firewall becomes.
The machine learning model updates.
Eventually, it naturally blocks the anxiety without him having to consciously think about it. It is literally cognitive behavioral therapy described in network admin terms.
It's amazing. But man, it's so hard to train that firewall when your system has been compromised for years.
It really is.
Brent replies to Chad, quote, anything besides depressed feels weird, and not being anxious feels odd.
Wow.
His baseline is so corrupted that feeling normal feels like a glitch.
Which is the tragedy of legacy malware. Once it has been in the system long enough, the host starts to view the malicious code as a core system process.
Removing the malware feels terrifying because the chaotic traffic is all they know.
Silence feels like a system failure.
Wow. Think about that in your own life for a second. Are you so used to the chaos of a toxic relationship or a stressful job that peace actually feels like a threat?
Are you mistaking the absence of malware for a system failure?
It's such a profound question.
It really is. So Chad is working massive overtime as the admin for Brent. But meanwhile, on his own primary network, Chad is dealing with a completely different kind of architectural nightmare.
Right, because while Brent is a corrupted node, Chad's romantic life introduces us to a concept that is dominating modern cybersecurity.
And this brings us to his relationship with Lauren, also known in the logs as Cameron Elizabeth.
Yes. If Brent is a node infected with malware, Lauren is a node operating in a strict zero-trust environment.
Zero trust. Take the time to explain zero trust because this is a massive buzzword in the tech industry right now.
Yeah, let's break it down. What was the old way of doing security and what is zero trust?
So the old way of doing network security was called the castle and moat model.
Yeah, so the moat.
You build a massive perimeter firewall, which is the moat. You assume that everything outside the moat is dangerous and untrusted.
Okay.
But once a user or a device gets past the firewall and inside the castle, they are implicitly trusted. They can roam around the network, access files, and communicate freely.
The problem is, if a hacker manages to breach the moat, or if an employee inside the castle goes rogue, they have total access to everything.
Right, which is how all those massive corporate data breaches happen. One phishing email gets clicked, and the hacker suddenly has the keys to the entire kingdom.
So to fix that, the industry shifted to zero trust architecture.
Exactly. The philosophy of zero trust is never trust, always verify.
It assumes that the network is already compromised.
Yes.
Yeah.
It assumes that threats are already inside the castle. Therefore, it trusts no one and no device, not even the CEO's laptop sitting inside corporate headquarters.
It requires constant verification, constant authentication, and strict access controls for every single action. Every single time you try to open a file or send a message.
Which is an incredibly secure way to run a corporate network, but an utterly exhausting way to run a romantic relationship.
Oh, it is suffocating.
Yeah.
And Lauren is running a zero trust relationship protocol. She is plagued by extreme jealousy.
And just like we saw with Chad's past, Lauren is running legacy code. Deep trauma from a past relationship.
The logs reference a figure named Andrew, who clearly caused significant damage.
And because of this legacy vulnerability, Lauren's firewall is constantly blocking legitimate, healthy traffic from Chad.
Legacy code is notoriously difficult to patch because it is intertwined with the very foundation of the system.
Right. Lauren's past with Andrew has written a hard-coded rule into her firewall. All male partners are inherently untrustworthy and will eventually upload a betrayal.
So even though Chad is a completely different node, generating completely different non-malicious traffic, Lauren's system automatically flags his actions as a threat.
She assumes breach.
She assumes breach. And this all comes to a head in a massive conflict over admin rights.
Admin rights. Let's talk about the ex.
Yeah, Chad has a 15-year friendship with an ex-girlfriend. For Chad, this woman is family.
He explicitly tells Lauren, quote, I don't really have any family I'm really close to. She was my family for 15 years.
The romantic connection is completely dead, but the emotional, familial connection is vital to his network stability.
From a systems architecture perspective, Chad views this friend as a legacy node that provides essential background processes, comfort, understanding, a shared history.
She does not have root access to his romantic subroutines anymore, but she has read-only access to his history.
She's a critical backup drive.
But Lauren operates on zero trust.
Right.
Lauren views this ex as an unauthorized backdoor threat to their relationship. She accuses Chad of running off to another girl.
She writes to him, quote, who's to say that because we didn't talk last night, you didn't call her up to cuddle?
Lauren believes this other woman still has unauthorized admin rights and could deploy a romantic payload at any moment.
And this is where we see Chad deploys defense protocols. He doesn't escalate with anger. He gets highly analytical.
He insists on his loyalty. He says, quote, I've given you no reason not to trust me. I've given you nothing but love, faithfulness, and devotion 100%.
He tries to logically explain to Lauren the difference between different communication protocols. To use a networking analogy, he's trying to explain the difference between port 80 and port 443.
Elaborate on that. What do those ports do?
So when you browse the internet, data moves through different virtual ports. Port 80 is used for standard HTTP traffic.
Unencrypted.
Yeah, it is open, it is unencrypted, it is basic. It's how you view a public web page. Port 443 is used for HTTPS.
The secure one.
Exactly. It is highly secure, encrypted, and it's where the sensitive data, like your credit card numbers, is exchanged.
So Chad is trying to tell Lauren that his ex-girlfriend is port 80.
Yes, the port is open. Yes, data flows back and forth, but it's just historical, public-level family data.
And Lauren, as the primary romantic partner, has exclusive access to port 443.
The deeply intimate, encrypted romantic connection belongs only to her.
But Lauren's zero trust system doesn't care. It wants all other ports closed permanently.
Right. And Chad tries to explain why he needs port 80 open.
He tells Lauren, quote, I hope that you never have to experience being hungry, broke, and alone while working your ass off every day and sharing my house with strangers, not because you want to, but because you have to, and the leaks and the rats.
He is effectively saying, this node kept me online when my system was crashing. I am not going to delete her from my network just because your intrusion detection system is throwing a false positive.
It's a fundamental clash of security architectures.
Yes, Chad operates on a principle of verified trust based on evidence and history.
While Lauren operates on pure zero trust based on fear.
And Chad actually addresses this directly. He tells her, quote, I think the jealousy emotion is fiercely wild in you. Try to understand it, work with it, instead of letting it control you.
He is begging her to update her threat definitions.
He is.
Okay, stop right here. I am looking at these logs, and I am completely lost on Chad's logic. I have to push back on him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think Chad is being a total hypocrite. Earlier in the logs, Chad defines selfishness to Lauren. He says, quote, making decision without consideration for the needs and feelings of others is the definition of selfishness.
Okay.
And yet, he knows how much intense pain this X causes Lauren. Her alarms are blaring 24/7.
All right.
He says he will wait as long as it takes to regain her trust.
Yep.
But is Chad's refusal to cut off this X actually a massive security flaw in his relationship with Lauren? If you are trying to establish a secure, primary encrypted link with a new server, and that server says, I cannot establish a handshake while this old connection is active, don't you have to drop the old connection? Isn't Chad the security risk here?
That is the crux of the architectural dilemma right there. You
Yeah.
are asking if the primary romantic link is the only link that matters.
Isn't it?
Well, if the goal is 100% peace with Lauren, then yes, dropping the old connection is the solution. But you have to look at the macro architecture.
Big picture.
Chad clearly believes in a decentralized network. Remember segments 1 and 2. He needs his friend node, his romantic node, his hobby nodes to maintain that balance he preached to Brent.
Right. The long-term sustainability.
Exactly. If he cuts off a 15-year support node just to satisfy Lauren's irrational zero-trust demands, he destabilizes his own core architecture.
He becomes entirely dependent on a single point of failure.
Yes, Warren. And from a systems engineering standpoint, relying on a single point of failure, especially one that is prone to irrational jealousy and emotional volatility, is terrible, catastrophic design.
Wow. Okay, when you put it like that, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
If Lauren goes offline or if the relationship fails and he has already cut off his primary support node, his whole system crashes. He has no backups.
He is protecting his redundancy.
He is refusing to compromise his system's redundancy to satisfy another node's paranoia.
Because he understands that appeasing zero-trust paranoia never actually results in trust. It just results in isolation.
That's a great point. Think about your own relationships for a second. Have you ever punished a new partner for something your ex did?
Have you ever demanded that a partner cut off a harmless friend because your own internal security alarms were miscalibrated?
That is you running legacy code. That is you enforcing a zero-trust environment that will eventually exhaust the person you love.
It is a recipe for system failure.
Totally. So we've seen corrupted nodes, and we've seen zero-trust friction. Let's look at what happens when a connection actually works the way it is supposed to.
Let's do it.
We're moving into the full spectrum of Chad's romantic network. Encrypted tunnels versus DDoS attacks.
And the contrast in the logs is breathtaking.
Let's start with the ideal state. The highly secure, fully encrypted connection. This is with a woman named Rebecca May Verl.
Reading their logs is like watching a perfectly optimized fiber optic connection.
There is zero latency. There are no dropped packets. It is completely seamless.
The lack of friction is the key indicator of network health here. There are no miscommunications, no false alarms, no desperate attempts to verify identity.
They playfully coordinate dinners, debating between Trader Joe's and Shaw's grocery store.
They respect each other's background processes.
Right. Rebecca has a pottery studio. Her dad is building her shelves. Chad doesn't demand all of her CPU time.
They communicate affection effortlessly with emojis and requests for snuggles.
Rebecca even jokes about her clearance level when asking for Chad's schedule.
I saw that.
She says, quote, I don't have access to that spreadsheet. My clearance level might not be privy to such classified information.
That is a phenomenal inside joke, and it proves she understands his base architecture.
She gets him.
She understands his need for autonomy and scheduling without feeling threatened by it. With Lauren, restricted access triggered a massive security alarm.
With Rebecca, it's an accepted, humorous part of the network topology.
This is what a healthy social network looks like. There is mutual support, they share resources smoothly like finances for groceries and beer, and there is clear, honest pinging of each other's status.
She pings, got time to see me tonight?
Yes.
He responds with a clear status update. No games, No spoofing.
It is beautiful. It is exactly what he wants.
But, Chad is a complex guy. And apparently his network is an absolute magnet for distributed denial of service attacks.
A DDoS attack.
Yes. For the uninitiated, let's explain what a DDoS attack actually is in the tech world before we map it to Chad's chaotic love life.
Right. A distributed denial of service attack is a malicious attempt to disrupt the normal traffic of a targeted server, service, or network by overwhelming the target with a flood of internet traffic.
Imagine a highway suddenly filling up with tens of thousands of fake cars so that the legitimate commuters can't get to work.
Hackers use a botnet, which is a network of compromised computers, to send massive amounts of garbage data to a server all at once.
And the server tries to process all the requests.
Its CPU hits 100%, its memory fills up, and it completely crashes. It is taken offline by sheer chaotic volume.
And in Chad's world, the DDoS attacks come in the form of married women.
It is a glaring, recurring vulnerability in his logs.
He confesses to his buddy Hugh that a second married one, a woman named Jennifer, has professed her love for him.
He tells another friend that it's happened twice in a single year.
Let's analyze the threat vectors of getting involved with a married woman, specifically Jennifer.
From a security standpoint, this is a nightmare scenario. You are intentionally interfacing with a highly unstable network that is already under the administration of another user.
And that other user, the husband, is described in logs as an angry guy who stays in the basement playing video games.
Yes. Jennifer's husband literally got kicked out of the house once for just staying in the basement gaming.
And Chad identifies this threat perfectly. He knows the husband is angry because, well, his wife is emotionally and soon physically cheating on him.
Chad tells Brent, quote, "I fully deserve to have my face broken."
He knows the physical danger. He knows the intense emotional drama. He knows the traffic is going to be incredibly chaotic and stressful.
And yet,
here is my observation, and I need you to explain the psychology behind this because it contradicts everything we've established.
okay,
This is a massive failure in Chad's own security protocols. Think about it. Chad tells Brent to minimize risks.
right.
He tells his boss that he wouldn't touch a workplace romance with a 100-foot pole. He tells Jennifer directly that she needs to make it work with her husband.
He has all the firewalls up.
The rules are clearly written,
Yeah.
and then he kisses her anyway.
Yeah.
He intentionally bypasses his own firewall.
Mm-hmm.
Why does a hyperlogical, risk-averse systems admin do that?
To understand that, you have to understand a concept in cybersecurity called alert fatigue, combined with basic human neurobiology.
Walk me through it.
In a security operations center, an analyst looks at a dashboard all day long. If the firewall rules are too strict, alarms go off constantly.
Just constant red lights.
Minor anomalies, harmless pings, routine updates, they all trigger flashing red lights. Eventually, the analyst experiences alert fatigue.
They just get numb to it.
They get so used to the alarms that they stop taking them seriously, they start ignoring the warnings, or worse, they temporarily disable the firewall just to get some peace and quiet, or to test something.
So Chad is tired of his unstrict rules.
Partly. But it's also biological. The prefrontal cortex is the sysadmin. It enforces the rules. It says, married women equal a broken face, do not engage.
But the brain's reward center runs on dopamine.
Dopamine craves novelty, thrill, and connection. When a sysadmin is lonely, or when they crave the thrill of an unauthorized connection, the dopamine overrides the prefrontal cortex.
The sysadmin intentionally opens a port to see what the malware does.
Chad literally tells Hugh, quote, "Hello, my name is Chad, and I like to be abused by women."
That is the confession of a sysadmin admitting he occasionally turns off the antivirus just to feel the rush of the system instability.
He acknowledges his own self-destructive subroutine. He tells Hugh that Jennifer helped him see that he needed more, and he felt he owed her the same.
He rationalized the breach.
The DDoS attack was successful not because it overpowered his defenses from the outside, but because he voluntarily opened the port to let the chaotic traffic in. Humans aren't silicon, they get bored of perfect security.
Which is just so incredibly human. It reminds you that underneath all the logic, the rules, and the boundaries, the core processor is still driven by emotion, loneliness, and the desire for connection.
Have you ever done that? Have you ever known a situation was completely toxic, a bad job, a terrible relationship, and you walked right into it anyway just to feel something?
You open the port.
Precisely. But what is critical here is that Chad recognizes the breach. He doesn't stay in the DDoS attack forever.
He ultimately logs the event, acknowledges the damage, realizes his system is crashing, and attempts to restore the baseline.
Which perfectly leads us into the final major section of our analysis: incident response and disaster recovery.
Because sometimes the network isn't just unstable due to alert fatigue or bad personal choices. Sometimes the network is under a highly malicious, targeted attack.
And we see Chad step into a pure, cold-blooded incident response role to help a friend in immediate physical and emotional danger.
This is perhaps the most critical, high-stakes function of a network administrator. When a breach is active and data, or in this case a human life, is at risk, the protocols must shift instantly from preventative to reactive.
The logs in this section are urgent. Chad is communicating with a friend named Lee, who also goes by Sure.
Sure's partner has crossed a dangerous line. We don't have all the specific details of the physical event in the logs, but Chad's threat assessment is absolute.
He writes to her, quote, "What he did is scary, abusive, extremely controlling, and manipulative. I know you care about him and you didn't want this to happen, but you didn't do this, he did. It's going to keep happening and keep getting worse if you keep trying."
The importance of clear threat labeling in Social Security cannot be overstated. When a system is compromised by abuse, the malware, the abuser, almost always utilizes a technique known in the tech world as a man-in-the-middle attack.
Oh, I have heard of that. How does a man-in-the-middle attack work, and how does it relate to abuse?
In a network, a man-in-the-middle attack occurs when a hacker secretly intercepts and relays communications between two parties who believe they are communicating directly with each other.
So the hacker is in between them.
The hacker can alter the data packets in transit. If you ask your bank for your balance, the hacker intercepts the request, asks the bank, gets the real balance of $1,000, changes it to $10, and sends the altered packet back to you.
You think the bank is telling you that you are broke?
And in a relationship, that is called gaslighting.
Exactly. Gaslighting is an emotional man-in-the-middle attack. The abuser intercepts the victim's perception of reality and alters the data packets.
The victim experiences abuse, but the abuser alters the narrative so the victim thinks they caused it.
Or that the threat isn't real, or that they are overreacting. The victim's internal logs are completely corrupted.
That is chilling.
So Chad steps in as a trusted external verification server. When digital signatures don't match, you query a trusted external certificate authority to prove identity.
Chad provides cryptographic proof of reality for sure.
He does not sugarcoat it. He says, "This is abusive, this is manipulative, you didn't do this."
He is counteracting the gaslighting by validating her system logs from the outside.
And then he executes the quarantine and recovery plan. And it is tactical, and it is cold, but it is entirely necessary.
He tells Sure, quote, "I think you should use this separation to your advantage as much as possible, not to screw him over, but to protect yourself and make sure you don't get screwed."
He tells her to secure her finances so the abuser doesn't have money to defend himself against her.
And most importantly, he says, quote, "If you don't have one already, I think you should get a protection order that prevents him from coming there."
Notice the pure clinical logic required in disaster recovery. When you are fighting an active ransomware infection or a malicious state-sponsored attack, you do not negotiate with the hacker.
You do not try to understand the hacker's feelings or their childhood trauma.
You sever the connection. You isolate the compromised drives. You protect the core assets.
Chad is advising her to execute pure emotional cybersecurity. Sever the compromised links to save the core system.
He tells her to get a protection order.
A protection order is the legal equivalent of a hardware firewall. A software firewall can sometimes be bypassed if the OS is tricked.
But a hardware firewall physically sits between the internet and the local network.
It physically blocks the malicious IP address from ever reaching the local machine.
It is incredible to see him transition from the guy who is philosophizing about the boat of life, or the guy who is bypassing his own rules to kiss married women, to a guy who is saying, lock the accounts, get the protection order, do not engage.
He understands that when the threat level is red, all auxiliary subroutines are suspended. Survival is the only process running.
And that is the hallmark of a mature, resilient operating system. It isn't perfect. It can handle day-to-day inefficiencies. It can experience alert fatigue. It can even tolerate minor malware infections like a chaotic romance for a little while.
But when a critical existential security breach occurs, it immediately shifts all resources to neutralize the threat and protect the network.
Wow. Okay, we have covered a massive amount of data in Chad's logs today.
We have successfully reverse-engineered his Social Security protocols.
We started by mapping the local machine and looking at the importance of internal resource management.
Chad knows his CPU limits. He monitors for thermal overload, and he sets up strict heuristic authentication rules to protect his baseline and keep his attack surface small.
Then we saw the agonizing difficulty of trying to patch vulnerabilities in other nodes. His work with Brent showed us that you cannot just delete a rootkit-like addiction.
You have to troubleshoot the underlying anxiety, teach the system stateful inspection to draw bad packets, and
Yeah.
even then, the user has to want to install the patch.
We examined the extreme friction of zero-trust environments with Lauren. We highlighted the profound architectural trade-offs between maintaining redundant legacy support nodes on port 80 and satisfying a primary partner's intense, trauma-driven security demands on port 443.
We reveled in the joy of the secure, encrypted connection with Rebecca, where data just flowed without latency.
And we cringed at the DDoS attacks of the married women, proving that even the best sysadmins sometimes deliberately bypass their own firewalls for a momentary thrill due to alert fatigue.
And finally, we witnessed the cold, necessary logic of strict incident response with Sure, where deploying a hardware firewall and severing the connection is the only way to survive a man-in-the-middle gaslighting attack.
So after this massive deep dive, what does this all mean for you, the listener? Why should you care about the Facebook logs of a guy named Chad?
Because if we connect this to the bigger picture, your emotional network requires the exact same act of monitoring. You cannot just set it and forget it.
You have to ask yourself the hard questions. Are you running outdated trust protocols based on legacy trauma?
Are you forcing your partner into a zero-trust environment because you refuse to patch your old wounds?
Are you allowing a toxic connection to DDoS your mental health, draining all your CPU energy until you can't even function at work or in traffic?
Are you ignoring your own firewall rules, your own stated boundaries, just for the dopamine hit of a dangerous connection?
Your emotional bandwidth, your CPU power, is finite. How you configure your network determines the quality of your entire operating experience.
I love that. Your emotional bandwidth is finite. It brings us right back to the beginning. The diagnostic waters of human relationships are murky.
It is not a clean X-ray.
It is a complex, ever-shifting network of nodes, connections, malware, and patches. No system is perfectly secure, but you can always improve your protocols.
You can always update the firmware.
Which leaves me with one final provocative thought for you to mull over. Something to explore on your own that builds on everything we've talked about today.
Okay.
In the world of cybersecurity, there's a fundamental golden rule called the principle of least privilege.
It is the bedrock of modern system administration.
The principle of least privilege dictates that users, programs, and devices should only have the bare minimum access rights strictly required to do their jobs, nothing more.
If a marketing employee only needs to see marketing files, you don't give them access to the HR payroll database.
Why? Because if that marketing employee's laptop gets hacked, the hacker only gets the marketing files.
It prevents a minor localized breach from escalating into a catastrophic system-wide failure.
Exactly. So I want you to consider the admin rights you handed out in your own life. Look at the people around you. Have you given root access, the ability to completely alter your mood, the ability to define your self-worth, the power to shut down your daily functions, to someone in your emotional network who hasn't earned it?
Have you given someone the power to crash your whole server just because they didn't text you back?
Or worse, have you given root access to someone who is actively, maliciously writing toxic code into your daily life?
It might be time to run a full security audit on your own social network.
Look at the permissions you've granted. Revoke access where necessary. Train your firewall to drop the garbage packets.
And remember what Chad said.
Keep your boat light.